If you've been trying to fix your lower back posture for years and you're getting no results, you're probably working on the right muscles, but in the wrong way. Today, we're going to be closing that gap. Everything's going to be simple. Everything's going to be easy to learn, regardless of your background. The very first thing that we're going to focus on is a topic that creates a lot of confusion. What does anterior pelvic tilt actually mean? And we'll be going over that. So here, I'm going to put myself into the position of anterior pelvic tilt. From what we have here is a neutral spine. I'm going to arch my lower back. When I arch my lower back, as so, that is anterior pelvic tilt as a dynamic position where people can go in and out of it freely. Now, let's take a look at the other position of the lower back. What we have here is a neutral spine. In comparison, as we learned, this is anterior pelvic tilt of my hips in a dynamic position as I come in and out of it freely. To the same degree, posterior pelvic tilt is when I have my hips rotate inwards, right? You see my lower back rounded. This is posterior pelvic tilt. You also commonly see posterior pelvic tilt when someone is slouching while sitting, right? So same exact concept of rounding your lower back, whether or not you're standing or sitting, that would be posterior pelvic tilt. Now, the interesting thing about anterior pelvic tilt and posterior pelvic tilt is they're not necessarily evil. What I mean by that is, if you are a healthy individual and you can freely move in and out of anterior pelvic tilt, they both have their purposes. That's why the human body can do it. The issue is when someone has anterior pelvic tilt or posterior pelvic tilt at the wrong time of the day, doing the wrong thing, anterior pelvic tilt can be very uncomfortable. You have to do the right position at the right time of the day, and this is something that nobody teaches you. So you will be learning interesting things today. Going into a little bit more depth of what is good posture, we covered anterior pelvic tilt, we've covered posterior pelvic tilt. Let's take at good posture, which is the concept of neutral. As we covered earlier, this is a basic example of anterior pelvic tilt. For you to be in good lower back posture, in comparison to anterior pelvic tilt and posterior pelvic tilt, there is a median position. That median position is going to be called neutral, right here, okay? That position is a very small dot between those large ranges of how much you can arch your back and how much you can slouch. What you want to be able to do is know where neutral is, know how to feel it, and you will be able to maintain it. If you have anterior pelvic tilt while you're arching your back, sitting or standing, your lower back will feel really tight. That's very common with the anterior pelvic tilt pattern until you start slouching. Slouching is posterior pelvic tilt. The interesting thing about posterior pelvic tilt is very comfortable. Slouching is very comfortable. Everyone that likes slouching, they prefer it more than arching their lower back. But usually it's a vicious cycle between arching your lower back and slouching. You want both of those in moderation at the right time of the day. However, if you're not slouching, you're not arching your back, what you want is a neutral spine. Some people feel like they can't come in and out of anterior pelvic tilt. If you take a look at my posture right now, this is still anterior pelvic tilt. If I lean back and round my shoulders, this is a postural issue people have, where they have rounded shoulders and a tight lower back. If I try to bring myself out of it, it doesn't really feel accessible. Just because you can get to the point of neutral spine, then what, right? Maintaining neutral requires skills of its own. Let's do a couple of experiments on understanding why anterior pelvic tilt, neutral, and glute activation are all correlated. When I arch my lower back like this, you can clearly see my lower back is arched. I cannot squeeze my glutes. However, when I slouch down a little bit, now I can squeeze my glutes. This is something that you should try at home. This is how to properly coordinate your body to be able to activate your glutes. Now, when we're talking about posture, you do not need to be squeezing your glutes 24/7. You do not need your glutes stretched 24/7. You need everything within moderation. If you do not have moderation, then you start flying to the two extremes of overly stretched or overly tight. So when you see someone with good posture, their glute muscles are not underactivated in an anterior pelvic tilt position. They're not overactivated in a posterior pelvic tilt position because I can squeeze my glutes very hard in posterior pelvic tilt. However, in neutral, there's a little bit of glute activation there. I feel them, they're alive, but they're not really squeezing. So having good glute control is a huge step on mastering your lower back posture. For a lot of you that have rounded upper back, and it's not just a lower back issue, just understand that this is just the start of your journey, one step at a time. Subscribe to my channel to see more content like this, and I'll see you for the next one.